All right, guys, welcome back to ZT Fully Loaded. I am your host, Zachary Torres, and today is finally our college football 2023 preview. It is on the eve of week one. Tomorrow we got what I think is gonna be a fun game between Utah and Florida kicking off. So I thought today would be a perfect day to go ahead and kick off our college football preview. In our episode today, guys, we're gonna go ahead and have over unders on wins or season totals from all Power Five conferences. So I'll have an over for my favorite team and an under for my least favorite team. And then we'll go ahead and have conference winners from each of those Power Fives. Way too early prediction for our playoffs, and then my Heisman dark horse or my Heisman pick if I had to go ahead and lay a future. And then we're also going to have some week one picks, guys, and that's what we're actually going to start off this series with. I do apologize that there was no bets up on the channel on Instagram or Twitter today. I was preparing for this, and then I also got to record with my boys Horns 2020 for the first time. So most of these picks that you guys are going to hear, you can catch them over on their podcast, on their social media. Horns 2020, go give them a follow, the biggest Longhorn sports podcast and social media in the business. So go give them a follow, go buy some merchandise, support my boys AJ and Dom. But with that being said, guys, let's jump into it. All right. So week one is finally starting. Can't wait. I'm excited. It's been a very long time. College football, nothing like Saturdays. And to give you a little bit of insights, I don't know. College football has always been one of those favorite things. It's all out passion. Fan bases, student bases, tailgating, or watching live at home. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful time of year. It's a beautiful experience. And I'm just absolutely in love with it, guys. So to give you a little bit of background, when I first started betting, I actually did a parlay with Dom, but we did one single bet. And Dom over on the Horns 2020 podcast, and we took the over of UT and UTEP. And that first feeling of hitting an over, hitting your first bet was something I will never forget. It was just exhilarating, jumping up and down in our living room. It was a great experience and definitely one of those things I look back to every time when we're talking about bets and talking about college football. So huge shout out to my boy Dom. But let's go ahead and jump into this week's slate and hopefully we can hit some of our bets and get that exhilarating feeling. So week one, I got Texas State at Baylor under 62 points. I think Baylor is just going to be way too strong. They will pull their starters early, I believe, against Texas State. They have a lot of starters returning. I don't think Texas State musters up a lot of points. I do think Baylor is going to be close to covering the spread, but it won't be nearly enough to cover the over. So Baylor and Texas State under 62 points this Saturday. Jumping to our second game of the weekend, UTSA at Houston. I have UTSA minus 1.5. Houston is first year in Big 12. They lost their star quarterback and star wide receiver. Leaving last year with them, they went to triple overtime against UTSA. UTSA brings back a ton of their starters, moving up in conferences. I think it's going to be a huge year for UTSA outside of the Power Five, a sneaky good team in the top 25 at the end of the year. So I think UTSA takes this one minus 1.5, and they cover that spread pretty easily, minus 1.5. Jumping into our third game, I have Texas Tech University at Wyoming. I don't think Texas Tech is going to have as great of a season as everybody is saying, giving them praise for. However, I do think they're going to be too much to handle for this Wyoming team. Wyoming, it just won't have the offensive power nor the defensive power to go ahead and stop nor keep up with Texas Tech. I do think Texas Tech is able to win by at least 17 points, if not 3 touchdowns. So they clear that spread at minus 14. So give me Texas Tech at minus 14. I don't take pleasure in betting them, but I will take them this week at Wyoming. Moving on to ECU and Michigan, we get one of our Big Ten favorites, Michigan, in action. Yes, they are out without John Harbaugh. I apologize. They are without John Harbaugh. However, I do think they cover the over 51.5. Last year, they played 3 non-conference games that were against non-Power 5 schools. They scored 50 plus in each of those games. So if we could just muster a field goal from ECU on that pace, we cover this over. I do think Michigan has the offensive power to bring back their weapons. Blake Corum is still back as well. Even without Harbaugh there in the mix, I definitely do think they cover and hit the over 51.5. And hopefully we get a little bit of offense in the second half from ECU to help cover that over. And then lastly, our fifth pick of this weekend, and it is probably my favorite game on the slate this weekend, It is a Sunday game. LSU at FSU. That place is going to be rocking. I want to say it's number 5 in the preseason rankings versus number 8 in the preseason rankings. Give me LSU money line. Yes, they are on the road. Yes, there's a lot of hype behind both teams, especially FSU. They can be an ACC title contender. However, I think LSU is the better team, and I actually think they are going to be my sneaky favorite for SEC and for the national championship this year. Give me LSU. Brian Kelly turn around the tide. It won't happen like last year. LSU takes this victory at FSU this weekend. I'm only going to take money line just because I think this can be a late field goal at the end of the game to win it by 1 or 2 points, or even just 3 for a push. Give me LSU money line, and those are our 5 picks. Again, Texas State at Baylor under 62 points. UTSA at Houston. UTSA covering the spread -1.5. Texas Tech University -14 against Wyoming. ECU and Michigan covering over 51.5, and then LSU money line at FSU on Sunday. Usually, I'll try to limit these picks to about 3 guys. I do recommend trying to play them all as singles, but you could do a little bit of a sprinkle on a parlay and see if it hits. I'll keep track of it on the channel, guys. So on Saturday morning, I'll release my favorite picks, and I'll put it on our Instagram and on Twitter. Maybe I only go live before the action starts on Saturday. All right, guys. One other pick I do like, give me Utah money line tomorrow night. I think they're just going to be too aggressive. They're going to come out hyped at home. Their quarterback is back. It is surprising after tearing his ACL in the bowl game last year. However, I will take Cam Rising. I will take Utah to go ahead and win. I'm just taking money line, though. It's about a touchdown, -6.5, I believe. I'm just going to take money line for Utah on this one. All right, guys, let's move into some futures. All right, guys, so what we're going to do first is the over-under on wins. Okay, guys, so the way it works is the Vegas odds will go ahead and label out a team and project how many wins they'll have over or under. All right, guys, so I'm going to go through the Power Fives. I'm going to have one school from each of the Power 5 conferences as an over, and then another school that I feel will be an under, okay? So for my first over, I'm going to go ahead and have Clemson over 9.5. So we're going to start with the ACC. I'm going to go ahead and start with Clemson over 9.5. I do think they will get back into playoff contention this year. I love Cade at quarterback. I do think they will be successful, and I do think they hit over 9.5. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but they are my ACC favorite. As for the under, I will take Louisville under 8.5. I think 8.5 is a little bit steep. I do see them becoming bowl eligible. There is a lot of winnable games in the ACC. However, there is a few upsets that I could see in that schedule. They do have a couple of tough games. They do have Miami on their schedule. I think Kentucky at the end of the year. Kentucky is going to surprise a lot of people, and we'll talk about them shortly. They have Notre Dame on their schedule. Pittsburgh is going to be a pretty good ACC team to look out for. Even Duke, I know they're going to be playing at home against Duke, but Duke is a team to look out for as well. Can be sneaky good. So I do see that there can be a little bit of an upset lurking around there. But then some contentious games at North Carolina State, always a tough environment to play at. And then again against Notre Dame. So I can see those games being a little bit more tight, and Louisville's win total hitting under 8.5. Now jumping into the SEC. So my favorite over, and I just talked about them a little bit, is Kentucky over 6.5. I do think Kentucky is going to be a little bit better than what people are giving them credit for. I understand why it's a little bit lower. Will Levis just left in the draft last year. A great quarterback. However, I don't think their drop-off will be that significant. He did miss a couple games last year. They do return a lot of starters. And they don't have the toughest of schedules either. Of course, they play the powerhouses, but at the end of the day, they still have some winnable games out there. Just to start off the season, I see them 3-0. We have Ball States with Eastern Kentucky University and Akron. I do think they end up 3-0 at Vanderbilt. I do think that is a win as well. Versus Florida, that's going to be a very contentious game. I definitely think it's going to be well within the right for Kentucky to start off even 5-0, guys. And then we're looking for 2 more wins throughout the season. And those 2 wins can come from Missouri. They can come against Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State, and we'll talk about them shortly, is going to be one of the worst in this conference. It can come against South Carolina, and then it can even come again at the end of the year against Louisville. I definitely see them winning that at the end of the year if they're healthy. And then they have those games against Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and they have Tennessee and Alabama at home. You never know what can happen in a home game in college, guys, on a Saturday night. It's always something to look out for in those upset alerts. But even without those 3 games, I can definitely see them hitting their over 6.5. Moving into the under for the SEC, I'm going to go ahead and take Mississippi State for the under, guys. I definitely do think Mississippi State is in for a tough year and a tough schedule overall. Of course, they play in the SEC. That competition is no joke. And I definitely see them as one of those teams that just hits 6 wins, becomes bowl eligible, and doesn't take their bowl game serious, of course, because it doesn't mean anything. But I definitely see them as one of those teams that last 2 weeks they're fighting for their bowl game lives. Okay. Um, so to talk about it a little bit, they play LSU, they play Alabama, they play at Arkansas, at Auburn, they play against the Kentucky team I just told you I like, at Texas A&M, and versus Ole Miss, who's also ranked, guys. So those are already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 8 losses that I could see. I definitely think they beat Southern Miss at the end of the year for that bye week that they usually have. I definitely believe they beat Western Michigan. I could see them beating Arizona, Southeastern Louisiana, even though that was a school that had a football team. I could see them beating them. However, that SEC road, I can definitely see it becoming difficult and definitely see them struggling to have a bowl game bid, much less hitting the over 6.5. So give me the under on Mississippi State, under 6.5. Now let's jump into my favorite conference, the Big 12. And no surprise here, guys. I'm going to go ahead and take over 9.5 in Texas. And this is not just because I'm Homer. Texas is the favorites in the Big 12. It's going to be one of those years. We have 5 stars on both sides of the ball now. This is, I really think, Steve Sarkisian's solid roster for the first time. Quinn Ewers now having, 1 year under his belt, hopefully taking the year 2 leap. I know we lost Bijan. That is a huge blow overall. However, at the end of the day, we have a loaded running back room. We have a loaded wide receiver room. Let's not sleep on Jatavion Sanders at the tight end group. And then we have a beefed up offensive line, guys, that I definitely believe competes with anybody. And I definitely see them steamrolling the Big 12. Of course, in the Big 12, games are always going to be fun. There will be points scored. And it is hard to go into places such as Iowa State to play against teams just like TCU did last year. They had 8 one-score wins on their route to the title. However, I do think this is the year that Texas finally puts together those one-score win games and they pull it off and they hit the over of 9.5, guys. I definitely see the win against Rice, that second game of the year against Alabama. I know they're an underdog. I'll tell you right now, that's my game of the year. I'm not even taking the spread. Give me Texas money line, and we're going to go ahead and go into Tuscaloosa and get the victory. Last year, we would have had it with Quinn Ewers in the game. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. I definitely see us going into Tuscaloosa and beating the number 4 Alabama team and putting ourselves right in the playoff mix from the very beginning. I see it against Wyoming. I could see us beating Kansas, see us beating OU again at Houston, who's going to be the worst in the Big 12. BYU isn't very great. And then, like I said, the Kansas State and TCU games can be tricky. With all the trash talk going on at Texas Tech, I do believe we come out fired up on that last home game in Thanksgiving week against Texas Tech. I'll take that money line as well. So I definitely do think we hit over 9.5. This is Steve Sarkisian's year. This is the Texas Longhorns year. It might be a year too early to compete for the title, but I definitely see ourselves in the playoff conversation. It is about time. We are back. Horns 2020, Texas Longhorns, Quinn Ewers. We are set up for a great season, guys. I'm excited. Most excited I've been in a very long time. Give me the Texas over 9.5, and we'll talk about their conference winner odds shortly. Now jumping into the under. This is nothing. That's not hate. Yeah, I know it's going to come off as hate, but to talk about OU having the same over under as UT, when UT has many more players, has the upside of a coach that's been there with some relative success and recruiting power. Brent Venables just hasn't had that same luck. I don't see the how should I say it? The opportunistic mindset going into the season or the lofty expectations. And I was actually surprised to see it at 9.5. I was expecting 8.5. I was expecting even 7.5 with high odds or low odds. I apologize. But at the end of the day, I definitely see them starting off 4-0, maybe 5-0, hitting that road against us or against Texas on October 7th. But at the end of the day, I can see them slipping up against at Oklahoma State. That rivalry is no joke, and on the road, that is a tough one to end the year against TCU. That is a tough one as well. And you just never know with these road games, guys. ISU is always one of those stingy teams. I will admit, getting to play West Virginia at home, getting to play ISU at home takes a little steam off of that. And then a very weak non-conference schedule helps them get to the 9.5. But I definitely see another slip up other than us. And I see that coming on the road against Oklahoma State. And I definitely could see them having a tough time against TCU, which I think that's where it'll come down to. And I'm going to go ahead and take the OU under 9.5. Now let's jump into the Pac-12. Pac-12, we all know it's going to become diminished this year. This is why this season is going to be more exciting than many seasons. All of the conference realignments that are bound to happen this year or happen this year with the Big 12 and then are bound to happen next year with the Pac-12 diminishing, Big 12 expanding, Texas and OU going to SEC. It's going to pick Big 10 expanding. It's going to be very, very exciting and different landscape, different competitions, different rivalries coming up in the near future. I'm excited for it. But for the last year, the Pac-12, I'm going to go ahead and take the over of Stanford. And I know that's kind of like, whoa, why Stanford? They're terrible. Let me tell you what. Stanford over 2.5, guys. Let me just tell you right away, their first two games, their favorite against Hawaii. Hawaii was competitive. I do definitely see this game being very competitive. It's going to be a sweat game this weekend. But they're favored by 4.5 against Hawaii this weekend. So that could be win number one. And then they are favorites, and they're going to be favored against Sacramento State next weekend. 32 games and for their over-under season total. All we would need is one more game through the rest of their season when they have teams like California on their schedule, when they have teams like Colorado on their schedule. And you never know. Those Pac-12 late night games, you just never know what they could turn into on a Saturday night, and they just need to upset one more team. At the end of the day, I don't see them upsetting an Oregon. I don't see them upsetting a Utah, upsetting a USC for that matter. And I'm not going to get carried away and saying that they're going to do so. What I am going to say is that I definitely see them pulling off the victory this weekend against Hawaii. I definitely see them winning next weekend against Sacramento State, or 2 weekends from now. I apologize. Next weekend is against USC. I don't foresee that happening. But against Sacramento State on September 16th, we are already 2/3 of the way there within the first 3 weeks. They have Arizona on their schedule, not a powerhouse. Colorado on their schedule, whose over-under is 3.5 or 4.5. They have UCLA, who has a ton of drop-off this year at home. So I can see that as an upset alert. Washington State, and then versus Cal. You have those opportunities for upsets against Oregon State, against Washington at home. But I don't see them beating Oregon. I don't see them beating USC. And honestly, I don't see them beating Washington or Oregon State either. But you never know about these upsets. We just need one more game throughout the rest of that season. I definitely see they get it done. They're coming out hungry after the turnover they had last year. I see them hitting at least over 2.5. Even if it's just 3, it's still over 2.5. Now the under that I like. I'm going to go ahead and take under 6.5. Okay, under 6.5 for the University of Cal. California Golden Bears, I think they're just as bad as Colorado. I think they're just as bad as Stanford for that matter. And to have Stanford at 2.5 and California at 5.5, the over would mean that they qualify for the bowl game. I definitely don't see them qualifying for a bowl game. Yes, I do think they win their season opener. Actually, I won't even go as far as like saying that. I definitely think UNC gives them a run for their money in the season opener, guys. UNC is a very slept-on team. I actually want to look at those odds in that spread. That might be something to jump on against UNC. The following week against Auburn, I don't see them winning that. I do think they pull off the game against Idaho. But other than that, that's when they jump into the Pac-12. They won't win against Washington. They won't win against Oregon State, against Utah, against USC, against Oregon. And let me tell you what, they have Oregon State, Utah, USC, and Oregon back to back to back to back. Imagine 4 games. That is a gauntlet to go through, guys. By the time you hit Stanford at the end of the year, you might have no energy, no players left to play with. I definitely do not see them hitting 5.5 and becoming full eligible. So give me the under 5.5 on California. Now our last Power 5 conference team, our Power 5 conference, the Big Ten. Big Ten expanding with those Pac-12 teams coming over next year. But I do think this is going to be a very exciting year for the Big Ten, regardless of that. it is not to be slept on with the three top teams. I do definitely think it's going to be a three-horse race, and them beating each other at home or even upsetting each other on the road. And those three teams being Michigan, Ohio State, I apologize, and Penn State. And speaking of Penn State, that is going to be my over pick. Penn State over 9.5. I definitely think Penn State has a lot to offer this year. I definitely think they're going to be competitive. And like I said, I can see them in this race now with Michigan, and I can see them in this race with Ohio State. And beating one of those two and the rest of their conference, which those three teams should stomp on the rest of the Big Ten conference, that gives them their over 9.5. So beat one of those two teams, stomp through the rest of your conference. I can see the regular season win being over 9.5. Big Ten is not that powerful. It is very top heavy. So give me Penn State over 9.5. Now jumping into the under. I know there's a lot to be said about Nebraska's history. Everybody wants Nebraska back. They are good for football, just like Texas, just like USC. But I don't think they're at that level either. And I don't think Matt Rhule will be able to turn it around this quickly. He's the new incoming head coach. I'm happy for Nebraska to a certain extent. I definitely don't see them becoming bowl eligible, much less winning 7 games in the regular season and their first season with Matt Rhule. I do think they're going to be pesky. I do think they're going to be a tough out. However, playing against that top-loaded, heavy teams of Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, when needed, I definitely don't see them pulling victories off there. I don't see them pulling off a victory this weekend against Michigan, I believe, either. Again, I think it's going to be very competitive games. There'll be few that they sneak out. I don't see them winning 7 games this year, though. Hopefully, Matt Rhule gets it together. Hopefully, his recruiting classes come together and they become competitive in a couple of years. That'd be huge for that conference, huge for college football in general with their history. I just don't see it this year. And I'm going to go ahead and take the under 6.5 on Nebraska. So that is all of our totals for the Power 5 conferences, overs and unders. I hope you guys enjoyed that segment. I feel really strongly, guys, and my favorites, honestly, Stanford over 2.5. I really, really enjoy that. And then I really think the under on Mississippi State, guys. I want to see under on California. Those are my 2 favorite unders, Mississippi State and California. California, like I said, goes through a gauntlet, guys. And I definitely don't see them healthy at the end of the season after that gauntlet, or much to play for after that, to where I see them even dropping those final games against competition they should be competitive with. So I'll take the under 5.5 as my favorite under with California, and my favorite over there in the Pac-12 as well with Stanford. But of course, my other favorite over, the Hook 'em Horns, Texas over 9.5. And that drops us into our futures of our Power 5 conference winners, and these usually are going to end up being your playoff contenders. So for the ACC, like I told you guys earlier, I think Clemson has a bounce back year. Dabo Swinney has a bounce back year, gets his Clemson players back into shape, have some returners coming in, still have that 5-star recruiting power. I definitely think Clemson hits that over 9.5, and they are the ACC champions at the end of the year. For the SEC, this is where the dark horse is. I like LSU, guys. I like LSU to beat Georgia. And if it's not beating Georgia in the SEC championship, it's beating Georgia, or for the SEC championship, I apologize. It's beating Georgia in the national championship, guys. I do think they're going to beat them at least once this year. And I do think it's going to be for a trophy one of those times. So give me LSU. I'm going to go ahead and take them for the SEC championship winner. They're number 5 to start off, return a lot of starters. Brian Kelly's second year there in LSU, return their starting quarterback. That can never hurt you. Just like what I'm going to talk about later on with Quinn Ewers, I think the additional year of experience in that system, in that stadium, with that team is going to be very valuable to them. With questions at Georgia's quarterback, I know they have 5 stars everywhere. Give me LSU, though. They do have returning starters. They also have 5 stars. They have a great coach. They have a great quarterback. And less question marks, and they're hungry at the end of the day. They are the hunters. Georgia is the hunted. Now, jumping into the Big 12, we don't even have to discuss this much. We're taking Texas Longhorns all day long. Conference winners. It's going to be the first time in a long time. It's probably the most excited I've been for a Texas season since I became a Texas fan, since I attended the university. Quinn Ewers is going to lead us to the promised land. Loaded running back room, loaded wide receiver room. Steve Sarkisian, the offensive mind. Defense has their studs on the back end as well. I definitely think this is going to be our coming out party, and it's going to get us on the right foot with the right foundation into recruiting for next year, into the SEC for next year, and let's close out our Big 12 era with a title. So Texas Conference, Big 12, I apologize, Big 12 conference winners. Now jumping into the Pac-12, this is another probably shocker to some. Don't get me wrong, Caleb Williams is probably the best player in the nation. I definitely think Oregon has more power, is bigger, and sometimes even better coached than USC. USC gets smacked in their mouth quite a bit. They are very vulnerable to upsets. They're very vulnerable to upsets against more physical teams. And if it's not in a shootout, they can't compete. Oregon brought in a lot of transfer portal players. They became a lot bigger on that in the trenches, and I definitely think that bodes well for that competition against USC. USC doesn't deal well with the trenches. USC doesn't deal well with physical players. They deal well with speed. They deal well with shootouts. But even then, in shootouts, when they get smacked around a little bit, like we saw in bowl game last year with Tulane, anything is possible. They can't tackle, and yes, they brought in some more recruits. They're going to struggle in the Big Ten next year, and I definitely think they struggle against a team like Oregon. So give me Oregon as the Pac-12 title winner. Now jumping into the Big Ten, give me Michigan. This is tough for me to say. Not tough for me to say. This is a tough decision. Like I said, it's going to be a three-horse race. I think it's going to be Penn State. It's going to be Michigan. It's going to be Ohio State. It's tough to pick those winners. I think Penn State is still the up and coming. They're the little brother to Michigan and Ohio State. I definitely think Harbaugh has found the recipe to success against Ohio State, and similar to what it is against USC, smack them in the mouth. Ohio State is designed to beat SEC teams with speed and with flex. Michigan is able to play that game, but also play a physical nature game. They also have less question marks. Ohio State goes into the new season with new quarterbacks and new starters, and I know they have Marvin Harrison, probably the best wide receiver in the nation. I think Michigan has just as many weapons, if not more. So I'm going to take Michigan to win that Big Ten. I don't think Harbaugh's suspension does much for them. He'll be back before conference play. He'll be out for those non-conference games. So go ahead and give me Michigan for the conference winner of the Big Ten. So I have Clemson, LSU, Texas, Oregon, Michigan. All right, guys, those are our Power 5 conference winners this year, in my opinion. All right, to go ahead and wrap us up, guys, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a way too early playoff prediction. So way too early playoff prediction. I'm going to go ahead and say the first two seeds, of course, are pretty easy based on our conference winners, Michigan and Georgia. Like I said, Georgia, even if they do get upset by LSU, they have 5 stars everywhere. I know they have questions at quarterback. Carson Beck is still a top recruit in the nation. He'll be able to carry that Georgia offense. And I definitely see them just having a come-out party, guys. So Georgia's still the elite in the SEC. And then I see LSU being that upset dark horse team. They're the number 5 seed right now. I definitely see them jumping into the top 4 by the end of the year. And then I see Michigan. Oh, well, we just talked a little bit about Michigan. But I do think Michigan is able to come out of that Big Ten. And then I'm going to do the homer pick here. I'm going to take Texas, guys. I find it very difficult and hard to believe that if Texas is able to go one win or one loss throughout the regular season, win the Big 12, stampede their way through games like OU, through TCU, through Texas Tech at the end of the year, it is still a tough conference. They will still have a good power schedule, even with Alabama at the beginning of the year. And like I said, that's going to be an upset pick for me. I definitely think they have more players at this point in time than Alabama. And I definitely think they can compete for the playoffs. Do I think they're going to be able to compete with a team like Georgia and Michigan this year? I do not. But I do definitely think that they have enough to get out of the Big 12. And I don't see the playoff committee holding out a one-loss Texas and a Big 12 championship Texas out of the playoff. It's good for college football. It is good for the Big 12. It is good for the SEC. It is good for the world. Texas is the biggest brand in sports. I do not see the playoff committee holding out the biggest brand in sports from their first playoff berth the year before they go to the SEC. So give me a one-loss Texas into the playoffs as the number 3 or 4 seed. And with that being said, I'll go ahead and list 2 teams that I see on the outside looking in. If Texas slips up one more game and goes into a 2-loss scenario, I definitely see them falling out. And I can see a Clemson jumping in there or an Oregon. both my conference winners, my projected conference winners, in my opinion. Clemson, a very good team, has the history of the playoff. They also play a pretty competitive schedule, to say the least. And then I'll also say Oregon, right? Oregon coming out of the Pac-12, being able to beat teams like USC and Utah potentially, to boost their roster, coming out of a Power 5 conference. I definitely think they can be the number 4 team sneaking in there, but as of right now, I have them as the number 5 and 6 as Clemson and Oregon. And last segment, guys, of our video today, our Heisman pick. I know, like what I said earlier, Caleb Williams is probably the best player in the nation at USC. Wouldn't be surprised to go ahead and see him win it again. I think his odds are like plus 300 or plus 500 or on there. I just want to go ahead and try to differ a little bit. So let's look up those odds really quickly. Yeah, Caleb Williams, depends on the site that you're playing at. FanDuel plus 500, DraftKings plus 450. So I guess an MGM plus 475. And of course, I want to go with Quinn Ewers. At the end of the day, I just think with the running game that they have, with the defense that they have, even like playing games like Rice this coming weekend, getting pulled early, I don't think he has those astronomical numbers that Caleb Williams has. He won't play in so many shootouts. They will be able to run the ball to milk the clock. They will have yardage games there. So at the end of the day, I hope it's Quinn Ewers. That'd be beautiful. Love Quinn Ewers. Excited to see where he goes in the league next year. However, I think my sleeper for Heisman, if I'm not taking the favorite, Caleb Williams. Of course, Caleb Williams is my pick. But if I'm not taking him, because it's, of course, it's still plus money, so that'd be a good bet. I'm going to go ahead and take Sam Hartman. Sam Hartman at Notre Dame, the transfer quarterback. He looked great week 1, or week 0, I should say. And I know it was against a Navy team. At the end of the day, he had some beautiful passes. He has some weapons on the outside. For the first time in a few years, Notre Dame has some weapons on the outside to look forward to. And they play a very tough schedule. And that might be the downfall. But what I'm going to bank on is them to come out victorious in this tough schedule. And this might even put them in the playoff. And that's not a team I discussed because they're independent. But playing teams like Tennessee State and this coming weekend, NC State the following, and Central Michigan, I definitely think it's the opportunity to boast those stats, put up 300-yard games, putting up multiple touchdown games, and putting him already in that conversation. To when you start playing OSU at home, when you play at Duke, when you play at Louisville, against USC at home, and at Clemson. So between OSU, USC, and Clemson, 2 of those 3 at home, if you can win 2 of those 3, he's definitely in the Heisman conversation. If he wins 1 of those 3, he puts himself in that conversation. If Notre Dame is in the top 7, he's in the Heisman conversation, because a lot of it is going to be on his shoulders. Yes, they have a strong running game. Yes, they have the offensive line. At the end of the day, it's going to make him look better. Sam Hartman has a beautiful ball. I am a big fan of his, and I definitely think winning 2 of those games, OSU or USC, can vote very well for his Heisman odds. If they win those games, it's usually going to be on his arm, and he is going to have a Heisman moment in one of those games. Imagine being USC and Notre Dame, last second win for Notre Dame. That is his Heisman moment over Caleb Williams. That can be both well for him and his Heisman odds at the end of the day. So give me Sam Hartman at plus 1,600, plus 1,400 in other sites. As a dark horse. Again, I think Caleb Williams does run away with it just because of the offensive output that he'll have, just because they are going to be a competitive team. They are going to have a lot of wins. But Sam Hartman, if they are able to pull off 2 of those 3 wins, can be a very scary team in Notre Dame, and it can be a boost to his Heisman odds. All right, guys, with that being said, that is our college football preview. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel, guys. Please follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Feel free to leave on the comments your guys' favorite bets for week 1, your guys' favorite futures, your guys' favorite Heisman bets, or your way too early playoff predictions. I'm excited to hear you guys. I'm just excited the college football's back. NFL is just around the corner, guys. It is finally fall, and we are looking great. So I hope everybody has a great week 1. I hope everybody has a great Labor Day weekend. I'll probably do a video, if not just a post, for Saturday's games or Saturday's slate. I appreciate the support. Give me some likes, give me some follows, give me some views, give me some subscribers. I appreciate it all. Catch the picks weekly on the Hordes 2020 podcast. Go give them a follow and a subscribe. My boys, AJ and Dom. I appreciate you guys. Have a good night. Have a good Labor Day, and hook 'em horns.